Today I want to chat about natural versus synthetic nutrients. Natural nutrients are those that we get naturally from the food we eat. Synthetic nutrients, on the other hand, are those that are made by chemical synthesis in the lab to mimic what is found in nature. Now, from a chemical point of view, these nutrients are very similar. But are they the same thing? And are they used in the body in the same way? Can they both make up a healthy diet? Last week, we spoke about how, by definition, traditional kibbles and canned food are ultra-processed, and that nutrients are lost during processing. What manufacturers do to ensure that the diets are still complete and balanced, though, is by supplementing with additional vitamins, minerals, and sometimes amino acids. Opponents to these diets state that these added nutrients are usually synthetic and therefore undesirable. Instead, they say feeding a varied diet with natural nutrients is better. Yes, of course, getting all the nutrients our body needs from food clearly makes sense. But in reality, how practical is it? And if it's not practical in some circumstances, then what are our options? We're all about pet nutrition at VNG, but I'm going to spend some time talking about human nutrition because I think it's helpful to describe things in a way that's more relatable. So this was my actual diet yesterday, which equaled about 1,900 calories. And I think it looks pretty good. I got a nice mix of vegetables, some leafy greens, fruits, whole grains, pulses, and some lean meats. I also have some nuts and avocado, as well as some dairy products for calcium. The nutrients I got from eating these foods are naturally derived, as they came from the food themselves. In an ideal world, we could all do this, eat whole foods and get everything we need from them. But how did I do with my diet when compared to the recommended daily nutrient requirements? Surprisingly average. I took the nutrient reference values for Australia and New Zealand, which are a set of recommendations for daily nutrient intake, and I compared that to what I ate. These recommendations are very similar to the USDA dietary guidelines for Americans. Now, out of the 29 essential nutrients, I was deficient or ate too little of 5 of them: calcium, folate, iron, vitamin D, and iodine. Vitamin D I might get a pass on just because I live in Sydney and I get a fair share of sunlight on a daily basis, so I can make my own vitamin D through my skin. But if I lived in the UK, in winter, that would be another story. Now, another 7 nutrients I just skirted over, either nearly meeting recommended amounts or surpassing it only by a little bit. So in total, 40% of my essential nutrients were dodgy or close to being dodgy. And remember, this is me having not too shabby of a diet. There seems to be a misconception that humans eating a varied diet, and one that you believe is healthy, that you'll be fine nutritionally. But that's not always the case. Nutrient deficiencies are common, even in first world countries. The World Health Organization declares that iron, vitamin A, and iodine are the most common nutrient deficiencies globally. So I guess it's not too surprising that 2 out of the WHO's list were also on my list as well. It's hard to get this right, although a varied diet undoubtedly helps with this. Because maybe next day I'll eat something that has enough calcium and iodine, but maybe my zinc will then be a little bit low. For healthy people and for healthy pets, this is fine. But when there is disease or other conditions that you need to be confident about what you're eating or what you're feeding, that's when it gets extra tricky. Supplementing comes in as being an important nutritional support to fill in these gaps. This can be done with concentrated food ingredients or synthetic nutrients. Concentrated food ingredients provide natural nutrients yet again, and it is the most preferable thing, as long as they actually contain the nutrients you're needing. Kelp, for instance, is a natural source of iodine, but how much iodine they actually contain depends on the species, location, season, and even which part of the plant is harvested. Beef and lamb liver are often used in pet food because they're rich in minerals, but how much they contain too can vary depending on the age of the animal, location of the farm, and whether the farmer was giving the animal supplementation. With synthetic nutrients, the amount is at least standardized, so you know how much you're giving. So what are the other positives and negatives of synthetic nutrients? I've heard concerns regarding the isolation of synthetic nutrients and how they're not as well absorbed as natural sources. The evidence is mixed on this topic, with some nutrients more clear than others. For example, it's accepted that synthetic vitamin E, or alpha tocopherol, is only about 70% as bioavailable as natural vitamin E. Whereas vitamin C, the difference is not thought to be biologically significant. So to take that argument into account, each nutrient should be considered on its own, instead of brandishing a broad brush on all synthetic nutrients. Another feature of synthetic nutrients is that they are high in potency because they're so concentrated. This is an important benefit because that means the volume that you have to give is much less than what it would be in food form. For instance, this is the amount of sunflower seeds you would need to give to equal only about 1/3 of a capsule of the synthetic vitamin E. Even considering the differences in bioavailability, this is a significant difference between the two volumes. There are concerns, though, that the higher potency of synthetic nutrients could cause a risk of toxicity. However, this is true for natural sources too, such as giving a toxic dose of vitamin A by giving too much liver. So it's not an exclusive concern for synthetic nutrients alone. So when are synthetic nutrients helpful? Well, in older animals where volume becomes an issue. They are eating less, so volume can be an issue, and they need to be eating nutrient-dense foods. Other animals, such as those that are picky eaters or on a restricted diet, such as pets with food sensitivities, synthetic nutrients can also be very important. These animals are not able to vary their diet as often or at all, and it isn't always easy to source emu or crocodile liver. Also, they are important when dose is important. Vitamin B12 deficiency in pets with GI disease who have hypocobalanemia, you don't want to be messing around with nutrient variation there. And then finally, calcium in large breed growing puppies. These guys are at risk of developmental orthopedic disease, so you want to be very certain how much calcium they're getting. You can get bone, but these need to be finely ground as the size of the bone pieces can greatly affect digestion and absorption. So, as with so many things in life, there are nuances to this discussion. While obtaining all our nutrients through food and not needing supplementation would be ideal, it can be difficult to do that all the time. This is okay for healthy humans and for healthy pets, if you can feed a varied, healthy, and nutrient-dense diet. But it's trickier for the young, the old, and those with medical conditions. And in these cases, synthetic nutrients have an important role to play. Thanks so much, everyone. As always, you can check out our blog in the link below, which will have more details on this topic. If there's anything else you would like us to talk about, please feel free to leave a comment below. And we'll see you next time.